Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be back and welcome Jen Chestnut, aka Coach Jen, as many of you know her. We're always talking about fun things behind the scenes over here. So I said, Jen, we have to talk about this today, bring more awareness to the conversation of autoimmunity and inflammation during the period of time of your, trying to get pregnant, trying to conceive, and during pregnancy. So welcome back, Jen.
Thank you.
So let's start off the conversation with, you know, why don't you share a little bit? I know we've talked a lot on the podcast, but I don't really think that you've shared much of your story with dealing with autoimmune. So how about we start there? So everyone just knows, I mean, you don't have to go only go as deep as you want to go, but just so everyone can be a little bit more aware of the autoimmune things that you have dealt with, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so it this whole fun journey started probably 12 years ago now, maybe. I was dealing with severe fatigue, severe brain fog. Like I would go to work and then my choice was to come home and either cook dinner, clean, or work out. Like I couldn't do two of the three. I couldn't do all three. It was like one thing. And then I would just plop down on the couch and watch TV, which is something I never did. If it was sunny, I was outside. I wanted to go hiking. I wanted to go do things. And I was losing that love of being outside. Um, the fatigue and the brain fog were probably the absolute worst. And then my body just started gaining weight, even though I was eating, back what we'd call super clean, and I was working out. I wasn't overtraining. I was very aware of all that stuff, and so I didn't know what was going on. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so I was drinking caffeine to help give me the energy, but it never
Of
did
course.
anything, of course. So I would go see doctors and I would say, because my family has a history of Hashimoto's. And so I would always say, check my thyroid. We have Hashimoto's. These are my symptoms. They would do blood work. They would check my thyroid. They would just check the basic THS levels. That's a key thing.
TSH.
Yes. What did I say?
It's okay. It's TSH.
Okay.
I'll just correct along the
Just
way.
correct me. And they would say, nope, you're totally normal. You're actually more hyper. And I'm like, I don't have a single symptom of hyperthyroid. And then they would say, well, you're just totally fine. I can give you some antidepressants or anxiety medicine. And I was always like, that's not even a symptom I came in with. Like, yeah, you're going to give me that right now, but that's not a symptom. And so I would say no. And this went on for probably 4 or so years until I was
Four
talking to.
years?
Mhm.
Oh my goodness, Jen. I did not know it
Yeah,
was that
I
long.
literally felt like I was living in my own dark hole pit of crazy. It was a really mentally dark time that I hid from most people, but for me, it's not my favorite. Um, I was at my yearly women's physical with my midwife, and she had asked me how I was feeling, and so I started telling her, and she kind of sits more on she's both Western and Eastern medicine, but she does a lot with holistic stuff. And she said, it really sounds like there's something going on autoimmune wise. And she wanted to look at my adrenals. So we did some different kind of tests and we tested some more. We still didn't dive in on the thyroid side yet, and she said, okay, yeah, there's more going on in your body. Your cortisol is gone basically because you
Yeah, you
used
were
it.
plummeted with cortisol.
Yep.
Okay, I
I
just
was,
I just want to I want to say this again, and I know we've talked about it on here before, and I've mentioned it that this whole and I am going to do an episode one of these days just cortisol, but so many people we talk about high cortisol, but usually when people start really having like crazy symptoms and especially that massively low fatigue, your cortisol has actually plummeted, and that is not a good thing. Been
yeah,
there too.
yeah,
So
yes. I know both of us have dealt with that.
yeah.
And so she actually put me just on a huge regimen of supplements. I mean, I was taking so many pills. I hate pills, but I did it and I started to feel better. So I finally was able to pull myself a little bit out of where I was, but I wasn't back to myself. I wasn't able to
Mhm.
lose the weight. Then fast forward a few years, a couple, actually more than a few years. But in 2015, I had a doctor look at me and say, did you like lose weight? And I was like, I don't know, maybe. He's like, well, have you done anything different? And this was a doctor I worked with, an orthopedic surgeon. And he's like, you look different. And then I went home and I weighed and I was like, oh, cool, I've dropped 10 pounds, haven't done anything different. But then the next day, the other doctor I worked with noticed an enlargement on my neck. So fast forward 2016, I get diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And the doctor finally, he tests me for my thyroid and he says, yeah, you are hyper. And I'm like, legit, look at my symptoms. I don't have a single symptom of hyperthyroid. I have everything for hypo. And so he said, well, let me test your thyroid on a cycle. And he's the first doctor to have ever done this. He waited, I don't even remember how many weeks, and then retested me again, but also tested me for Graves and Hashimoto markers, which nobody
Mhm.
had done before. And I had both. So I was legitimately cycling between hyper and hypothyroid. And he had said, have you ever gotten pregnant? And I said, no, I can't. And he said, that's probably a good thing because you might have lost the baby or your life for how your body is doing this crazy cycle. So we
Mhm.
finally had an understanding of what was going on. I go in for the cancer surgery and treatment. I did a lot of research in the meantime, and that's when I started to learn about inflammation in the body and all these healthy foods that I was eating. A lot of them could cause inflammation in the body. And so I thought, well, cancer got in my body somehow. I don't want it back. There's a chance it could have spread. I don't want to feed it. So I went about completely cleaning out my diet and took all the inflammatory foods out and started eating that way. And I started to feel amazing within 3 months. It wasn't like immediate. It took about 3 to 4 months for me to start really, really noticing the difference. But it was a night and day game changer. And so I just focused on the food aspect of it and I felt really, really good. Um, and then I had to wait a year from treatment before I could try to get pregnant just because of the chemicals that were in my body. And I was able to get pregnant immediately as soon as I was, 2 months, as soon as I was allowed to try again.
Okay, Jen, I want to pause you right here because you're talking about foods, and I know people are listening like, okay, well, what were those healthy foods, Jen, that you were eating, right? Quote, healthy, that you shifted and ended up being like, oh, they're actually not as healthy as we were told they were.
So a big one of the key staples of what I ate was legumes. I ate black beans all the time. And then grains. I ate quinoa all the time, black beans and quinoa. I had like my own little, I called it Jen's mush. It was just these ingredients I threw together and it was so good. Um, and especially gluten. I found out
Oh,
Hashimoto's and celiacs typically go hand in hand. And so I cut gluten
absolutely.
out and gluten is the one thing I cannot eat. Um, Dairy, I completely cut out dairy. Soy, which I didn't find out until after my first pregnancy, no, my second pregnancy. Soy is a huge trigger for my body.
Mhm.
And in a lot
So,
of our
Jen, hang
healthy,
on. I want to pause you. Wait, with thyroid, no one told you, even your midwife, not to eat soy.
no.
That blows my mind because that was like the number one food I learned. Well, actually, because when I was in my early 20s and I was originally in like, dietetics program, and it was like right at the time when soy everything became big. Soy milk, soy ice cream, right? All of that. And I threw my thyroid out of whack because I was eating so much soy. And so anyway, soy got the boot right away for me. I was like, oh, no more soy ever. But I'm surprised that no one, because it wasn't like that long ago that, what, 2015, right? You said when you started having? No, it was sooner before that. But that I'm surprised that no one mentioned that.
No,
Wow,
and
that
I took
blows my
soy
mind.
out because I was
Good.
warned that breast cancer and can be more prevalent in people with thyroid cancer. So I
Didn't
removed,
know that.
and
Okay.
soy, as we know, can be a precursor with breast cancer, the estrogen kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And so that was why I took it out. And I didn't realize how sensitive I was to it until after I had my daughter.
Until you got it out. Yeah. So can I just like highlight some of those foods you just said? Beans and legumes. And I know some people will totally argue with me and say, but I feel so good and I eat a lot of beans or eat a lot of legumes, especially if they're vegan, vegetarian, things like that. But I've studied nutrition for a very long time, basically since I was in college, started studying nutrition. And then obviously ventured more into holistic nutrition. And, pretty quickly, like they're definitely not foods that you need to avoid 100% for everybody, but everyone listening, I personally believe they should not be main staples in your nutrition. Even if you are perfectly healthy and everything, I don't think they should be main staples. You can dabble in them here and there. But yeah, especially with autoimmunity or inflammation in the gut, things like that, they can be very problematic.
Yeah. Yeah. And then grains, we think that eating your brown rice or your quinoa and that kind of stuff are super healthy
Mhm.
for you. But because of what's on them and what's in them, it can cause inflammation in the body. And people can say, oh, but I feel good. I feel fine. But you don't really realize how your gut is truly feeling until you get all the crap out and let it detox. And then when you try to reintroduce something, your body will tell you right away if this isn't a good thing for your body.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I mean, that's the hardest part. But even just cutting back on grains and see if you notice a difference. I noticed a massive difference with grains, but it's gotten better. When we go through phases,
Yes.
when inflammation is higher in your body, you're obviously that's fueling the inflammation and you're likely to feel even worse than once you really work to rebalance your body and maybe you have some grains here and there but not at every meal, maybe it's once a day or every other day. Because I find that with a lot of my clients that we get to a place where like having them maybe once a day with one meal is fine, but not having them with every meal because it just sends the body into too much inflammation. Okay, Jen, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about you during your pregnancies and how did your autoimmunity affect you during pregnancy? Because I know we have women listening that either have been pregnant or planning to get pregnant or are currently pregnant and likely have been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition because it's so rampant right now.
So I am one of those women who's not like, oh, I love to be pregnant. That is not me. But I love being pregnant because it seems like it literally puts my autoimmunity in a dormant state. Like it's gone. I feel like I just have these superpowers, which we talk about a lot of times. Um, And so for the whole first half or the first trimester, I stuck to keeping all those inflammatory foods out because I was afraid to let them back in because I'd felt so good. But then in my second trimester, when I could eat again, I was craving rice. I was like,
Mm,
okay, I'll try it. And I ate the rice and I had no reaction. So I let a lot of those inflammatory foods back in just so I could get
okay.
myself enough food to eat, but never gluten. Um, Gluten does never come into my diet unless someone accidentally glutens me. Um, but it was completely dormant. And the crazy thing was, I still felt that same kind of autoimmune superpower until the 6 week mark postpartum with my son. It was different with my daughter, but with my son at 6 weeks, I literally felt like someone flipped a light switch and everything changed. But you're postpartum, you're trying to go through all these emotions that are going in you, and you're trying to breastfeed and you're starving. And so I kept eating those foods, and I could tell that it affected me
Hmm.
again.
Yeah,
Um,
so let's talk about that because I feel like there'll be others listening. I feel like me too in a different way. But So what I learned when I went through my whole mold issue is my husband would say to me, I told you, he's like, you always seem to be healthier when you were pregnant. Well, because of, my detoxification pathways or lack thereof, the ability in the past, they're much better, right? So I learned through all of that we have what's called our body makes this DAO enzyme, and it helps to counteract histamines essentially. And so, which is basically, we get massive histamines when we have a reaction to something. And when we have autoimmunity, we're going to react to a lot more things. Well, when we're pregnant, one of our superpowers is we get an increase in our DAO enzyme production in our body. And it's massive. It's like 500 times amount. Like, I don't even think you could supplement with the amount of DAO enzyme that you have when you're pregnant, when you're not pregnant. Like that, I don't even know how that'd be a massive amount of that you would have to supplement with. So that is my perspective as to why, Jen, for you, probably likely you could tolerate a lot more because your DAO enzyme was like 500 times, right? Which makes sense because now all that reaction that was happening in your body is now suppressed. It's a fake suppression in a sense, right? Because that enzyme is counteracting it. And then it makes sense about 6 weeks after, right? That enzyme's going to be decreasing. Probably, I could see it taking, right? About 6 weeks. There's a lot that happens in that first 6 weeks. So now it's decreasing a lot. And then all of a sudden, you eating the same thing and now you start reacting. Because I had a similar experience where I could tolerate a lot more different foods when I was pregnant, but then afterwards I had to cut them back out again because I started reacting to them, and could not ever get any answers as to why that was until I went through the mold and was doing my deep dive into like what's happening in the body. And so anyway, I stumbled across that. It's kind of a little interesting tidbit.
That is super interesting because I always joke with my midwife. I'm like, you need to discover whatever this magical chemical is in my body and make it in pill form because I love how I feel autoimmune and strength wise when I'm pregnant. I mean, it's completely
Well, and
different
you know
health.
why you're stronger too, which I know you know this, but I'll summarize it for everybody listening. I was actually just got off another podcast. I was talking about this with the podcast I was on, and I was talking about, okay, so one of your other superpowers when you're pregnant is your collagen synthesis increases a lot, right? Well, it makes sense. You're growing a human being, and that human being's body is a lot of collagen matrix that's making up the body, the skin, the bones, the organs, all of that, right? So it doesn't just apply to baby, it also is your body too. And so that's why time and time again, I see pregnant women getting stronger and they're actually doing less and lifting lighter and doing those types of things and can become so much stronger in the right way in their pelvic floor and core. There's our plug, Jen. Okay, ladies,
Yep.
when you're pregnant, you got to come join Jen and I in our Knocked Up Fitness prenatal membership because you can get stronger. And, it's really the workout smarter, not harder. And when you have the right techniques, but there are two massive superpowers that you ladies have when you're pregnant. And that's why Jen and I love working with pregnant moms because it's so fun. It's such an awesome, exciting time in life.
It
And we'll
is.
help you tap into those superpowers.
Yeah, because I learned the difference between having that program and that knowledge. I didn't have it with my son, but then when I got pregnant with my daughter, which is a whole autoimmune story in and of itself, which we can talk about. When I got pregnant with her, I had that Knocked Up Fitness program, and the pregnancy and the labor and delivery and recovery was night and day. Like I will sing praises forever, which is why I love then helping our moms because it was such a huge difference for me.
You're so good at it. We all love you so much, Jen.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about what I know because I know you, like you said, your second pregnancy or with Callie was a lot different than with the first. So do you want to talk about what were the things that you then shifted? Because obviously after you had your little guy, right? Symptoms started coming back. You're like, okay, I got to go back to eating the way I was before I got pregnant or at the beginning of pregnancy. And then what else did you stumble upon that you needed to also shift and change in your life?
Well, so here's the bad thing. Here's like spilling the beans, being honest, I did not shift back for a couple years because I was enjoying my rice and my beans and
Mm,
a cheeseburger, everyone, no bun. But I really was enjoying having all those extra options because they're quick and easy. And I think that's the biggest thing to take away is a lot of us stick with that food because there's so much we can find in those realms and it's quick
mm,
and easy. And when you have a little
yeah.
guy and you're trying to work, you need quick and easy. Um, and so I let that brain fog come back in. I let that extra fatigue come back in, when I could have done so much better and messed up my sleeping. Not only did I have a terrible sleeper for a baby, but um, my sleep was completely messed up. And so we tried to get pregnant, and we couldn't, and we couldn't, and we couldn't, and we couldn't. And one night I was like up late and I was surfing Amazon and I'm like, okay, I'm missing something. And I was in books and I don't even know how I got to it. No, I was searching on Google and then it brought me into this book on Amazon and I was like, okay, fine, I'm going to order it. So I ordered these two books at 12:30 at night. And when the first one came, I read the first chapter and I was like, oh my gosh, it's the inflammation. I didn't put two and
Mm,
two together. I thought it was more cancer related with the first one, but then I was like, it's the inflammation. And so I did this 3 month on my own, like detox cleanse. So for the first month, I went back to what was simple and I took the foods back out. The second month, I actually changed all of the cleaning products that I use in my house to make sure I don't have any that are, have like endocrine disruptors or I mean, it's clean products. Help like if my kids were to drink it on accident, it's not going to kill them. Um, that's how extreme I went to cleaning it. And then the
mm,
next month, I changed all my makeup, all my hair, all my body, anything that went on me. I cleaned that out. I looked for all of those inflammatory chemicals that can be in all these products, especially gluten. I had gluten in a lot, like my hair shampoo had gluten. Well, that's not going to help me. And some people might think that's not your gut, but it all goes into the gut.
yes.
And then I was able to get pregnant just like that. And so it hit me that, oh my gosh, it really is my body in this inflammatory state because of my autoimmune that kept me from getting pregnant. It wasn't that buzzword of infertility. It's not that quick and easy diagnosis that so many, physicians want to give. There's more to it. There's so many women who lose hope or they pay all the extra money to go straight into these other procedures when if maybe they just took a step back and looked at what they were eating and took out the inflammatory foods, that could be the
Yeah.
game changer for them. It was for me.
Yeah. And the products, like you said, like you were trying so hard not to eat gluten, and yet you're getting gluten from products. And those of us that are really sensitive to gluten, you can't have it in anything. Like I was
Mm-mm.
so sensitive when I was deep in my mold, whatever you want to call it, fiasco that I had to deal with, that I was told by a mentor of mine, like your husband should not ever touch gluten right now while you're at such a heightened state because you just cross contamination from like him kissing me, right? I could get gluten from him. I'm like that I never had thought about that, right? And so there was a period of time where I was like, you really, he doesn't eat much anyway because he feels better without it. But I was like, you really have to like not eat it for me. And I know some people listen like that sounds just absolutely insane, but and again, but we can go through these periods of and cycles where when we're at a more heightened inflammatory state, you're just going to be so much more reactive to everything. And I wanted to make sure we hit on the fertility thing because I know we were talking about this the other day. We were both like the whole word around like infertility, like neither one of us care for that word. So, ladies, any of you that maybe, have dealt with that or you're in this world right now, I just want to reframe that for everybody. And that is instead of thinking of it as like working on infertility. It's like, no, you're actually reframing it to work on enhancing your fertility, because it is a shift in our body. And when we can work to shift the words that we use in our life, it can actually have a positive shift on your nervous system, which then ultimately can also help to decrease inflammation. So that's also something to, Jen and I were talking about the other day. I was like, we have to talk about the whole word infertility because it's such a like Debbie Downer. And, Jen, in your experience, and I know so many other women too, right, that have worked on enhancing their fertility, and also having your partner do some of the same things you're doing. Maybe they don't have to go as extreme, but we did an interview, was sometime I think last year, with Elizabeth King, and we talked about male fertility. You guys, if you haven't listened to that and you're in this stage of your life, go listen to that. She shared some crazy stats, and I honestly feel like if we were to look at the stats today, they'd be even worse. But anyway, it's not always, sometimes I think with working on increasing fertility, it always seems like it gets put on the woman. And yes, there are probably things that need to be improved. And again, always start with diet, you guys. Always, always, always start with food. It should be a number one thing before you go anywhere else. And then products, like Jen says. But then also your partner, your spouse, like can work on shifting their health as well. And then lo and behold, who knows what's possible?
Yeah, we had a friend, a family friend. It's one of my husband's really close friends. They were having issues enhancing her fertility, and the doctor actually told him he needed to stop his energy drinks. And that was the kicker for them.
It's so crazy. Yeah. Sperm quality, it matters. It matters.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, here's the thing I love about, and I love that conversation that Elizabeth and I had, was how fast a man can improve his sperm quality. Is like, he can do like a massive, like 180 with his sperm quality in like 90 days. Like, it's like women, like, I know we can feel a lot better in 90 days, but usually stuff isn't going to shift for us quite as fast. As men just have life a little bit easier. Let's just put that out
Yep, don't
there.
get me started on that
That's
one.
a whole other, Jen and Alvin, a whole other conversation about that for another day.
Yes.
Okay, Jen. So else were we wanted to talk about with inflammation and fertility, pregnancy. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with everyone that we haven't yet talked about?
How deep do we want to go?
We can go a little deeper.
Well, if we wanted to, so in between my my two babies, I had another pregnancy. And this was really when I first figured out that I couldn't have the inflammation, but I didn't understand it as deep as what I thought I did. And so the minute I got, so I, for a month, it was literally just a month, I cleaned up what I was eating, I got the inflammation out, and I got pregnant immediately. This was after, 2, 3 years of trying. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And then immediately I was able to. But I was like, I have this craving. I'm going to go back to eating this. And I did. I lost the baby early on, but later than the typical early on. And you worked with me on reframing this. My midwife worked with me on reframing this thought. But I honestly wondered if it was because I let those inflammatory foods back in so quickly during that nourishing time for these little babies trying to grow, the most important months, if that could have been the reason why I then lost if my body just wasn't able to produce what it needed to because I let those inflammatory factors back in.
Yeah. And I feel like there's probably other women have had those similar experiences and similar thoughts. And at the end of the day, we can never put it on ourselves because, we don't know why. It's in God's hands. It's like, so, but when we look at things and everything happens for a reason, and again, that's hard to understand. And I've never personally experienced a miscarriage myself. So that's why, Jen, I always let you speak to that to our moms who do, because you're so amazing at it. And you're just so caring and so loving about all of that. But at the end of the day, you can look at it and be like, it propelled your health and your kiddos. Everyone's just going to be healthier because of it, as hard as it is.
It really, I like to look at hard times and I try to find what the lesson is in it. Because I do try to be that optimistic person with, the glass half full, or I can refill my glass if it gets low, kind of a thing. Um, and so really, if I look at this, what it taught me though, it really helped me understand, regardless of everything, of how important what I eat, the things that are used in the environment around me, what I put on my body, how much it really does affect my autoimmunity, that inflammation in my body. And like you talked about, you're not stuck in this inflammatory autoimmune state forever. You can
Mm-mm.
heal it. It doesn't mean everything's going to completely go away, but you can make it better when you learn to decrease that inflammation. Heal the gut. Healing the gut is the biggest thing. And you talked about collagen. When something's going on with me, it's bone broth with collagen mixed in. That is the quickest way to really give my body the boost it needs and to help heal my gut. If I get glutened, that's my first step of going to. If I learned I was gluten fast enough, I'll take a charcoal pill. But I will
Yeah.
always go to my bone broth and collagen because it's so healing and it gives my body little superpowers again. But once I get everything healed, my sleep, I get in my movement, not overtaxing myself with my movement like what I used to do, with the foods I eat, with, the environmental factors around me, all of that, I can let more foods back in and they don't affect me because my gut's no longer inflamed and freaking out.
Yeah, we got to get things to calm down first,
Mm-hmm.
heal, and then slowly work to reintroduce other foods. And it is amazing. It is amazing how the body can heal. It really, really, truly is. And also believing that your body can heal. I think that's a big piece too, and wanting it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Visualization.
Visualization, love it. So good. So good for you. So good for us. So,
Yes.
Jen, thank you. And I am so grateful for you and so grateful for you being so authentic and open and sharing. And I really feel like there'll be a lot of ladies listening that are just going to feel even more connected to you after hearing your story and words of wisdom. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.